While the Central Pacific was agonizing in the mountains, the Union Pacific's campaign from Omaha, Nebraska was a study in chaotic, relentless, forward-moving momentum. The UPR was built by a different breed of men, former Civil War soldiers, Irish immigrants, and the roughest kind of frontiersmen. They were led by Major General Grenville M. Dodge, a veteran military engineer whose command style was more like a general on campaign than a CEO. Dodge's problem wasn't granite, but distance, money, and defiance. The moving city. As the UPR track advanced west, a bizarre phenomenon followed it: the Hell on Wheels towns. These were not permanent settlements, but rolling cities of canvas tents, wooden shanties, and saloons, which sprang up overnight at the end of track and moved every few months. These towns, like North Platte, Nebraska, and Laramie, Wyoming, were sanctuaries of lawlessness. They were filled with gamblers, whiskey peddlers, opportunistic women, and outlaws who preyed on the railroad workers, known as Gandy dancers for their synchronized labor, who had just received their meager, hard-earned pay. For every engineer or surveyor, there were dozens of parasites. The violence was endemic. Shootings, knife fights, and robberies were daily occurrences. The UPR's construction boss, General Jack Casement, a small, fiery former Union brigadier, was tasked with both laying track and imposing order. Casement's solution was simple. He ran the construction like a military operation, imposing strict discipline and using his own armed guards to dispense summary, often brutal, justice. The conflict on the plains. Beyond the debauchery of the Hell on Wheels, the UPR faced a deadly, organized resistance: the Native American tribes of the Great Plains, particularly the Lakota Sioux and the Cheyenne. For centuries, their entire culture and economy revolved around the vast herds of bison and the open plain. The Iron Road, they knew, was not just a path for a machine, it was an invasion. It cleaved their hunting grounds, brought legions of white hunters who began the systematic slaughter of the buffalo, and irrevocably altered their way of life. Attacks on UPR construction gangs, supply trains, and small military escorts were frequent and often devastating. Workers were scalped, trains derailed, and entire camps destroyed. General Dodge, himself a veteran of Indian fighting, responded by integrating the U.S. Army directly into his construction plan. Hundreds of soldiers were deployed to protect the surveyors and graders. In a horrifying twist of fate, the railroad became an explicit instrument of war designed to conquer not just the land, but the people who lived upon it. The most famous incident was the Battle of Plum Creek, 1864, where Cheyenne warriors derailed a UPR handcar, killing and scalping 2 workers. This was just one of countless small, bloody skirmishes that stained every mile of the track. Despite the threats, the UPR's method was a triumph of brute force logistics. They perfected a technique where everything, the ties, the iron rails, the spikes, the fish plates, the tools, and the food, was brought by train to the end of track. A massive team of track layers would then lay down up to 10 miles of track in a single day, a world record that became a source of intense pride and a powerful weapon in the financial race. By 1868, the Central Pacific had finally emerged from the mountains and entered the flat, fast-building deserts of Nevada. They could now compete with the UPR's speed. The race was on, and the 2 lines were hurtling toward each other, each driven by the same mix of patriotism, greed, and a relentless desire to win. The government had never specified where the 2 lines should meet. This omission, left open-ended by the original Pacific Railway Act, fueled the frantic pace of the construction, turning a public works project into a ruthless, winner-take-all competition. Since the government paid for every mile of track laid, regardless of necessity, both companies began to build furiously past each other, heading straight for their respective headquarters of their rival. The Great Grading War. By the spring of 1869, The two grading crews, the men who prepared the land for the actual track, were within sight of each other in Utah territory. This led to the absurdity of the Great Grading War. The CPR's Chinese crews and the UPR's Irish and ex-soldier gangs were working on parallel lines, sometimes only a few dozen feet apart. They were tasked with preparing two separate roadbeds for two separate, redundant railroads. The two rival crews would engage in constant sabotage. They stole supplies, dynamited each other's work, and generally tormented one another, all to claim an extra mile of government-subsidized track. This madness forced Congress to intervene. A commission was sent out, and the decision was made to set the meeting point at Promontory Summit, Utah Territory. The CPR would complete the track up to that point, and the UPR would complete its own. This ruling ended the wasteful race, but it did not end the incredible story of corruption that underlay the entire venture. The scandal of Crédit Mobilier. The true astonishing fact about the Union Pacific was not its construction speed, but its financial structure. The UPR and its chief financiers like Thomas Durant had secretly funneled all the government contract money through a shell company they created, Crédit Mobilier of America. The scheme. Crédit Mobilier was essentially a construction company owned entirely by the UPR's own executives and major stockholders. The UPR would award Crédit Mobilier hugely inflated contracts to build the railroad. The profit? The UPR's owners, wearing their Crédit Mobilier hats, would pocket the massive difference between the contract price and the actual construction cost. This meant the UPR itself was essentially going broke, but its owners were becoming multimillionaires from the government's lavish loans and land grants. The cover-up? When the scheme threatened to be exposed, key executives bribed influential members of Congress, including the Vice President of the United States, Schuyler Colfax, by selling them shares in the secret, immensely profitable Crédit Mobilier at hugely discounted prices. The scandal would eventually break in 1872, rocking the Grant administration and becoming one of the most infamous examples of Gilded Age corruption. The CPR's Big Four used a similar shell company, the Contract and Finance Company, to achieve the same end. The result was that the Transcontinental Railroad, the greatest physical symbol of unity and enterprise, was funded by one of the largest, most successful financial frauds in U.S. history.